Comparo, bulb Comparo. I have a Husqvarna 500 and it keeps blowing out the little incandescent bulb. Vibration, who knows what it is. Anyway, they don't last long, a couple thousand miles. So what I'm going to do is test a LED. I'm going to test an HID, high intensity discharge, a plain old halogen, and a standard bulb. Now to do this, I'm using a temperature probe to test the temperature the headlight gets to, because it's plastic and it's already melting with the plain 3535 incandescent. I'm going to run a little amp meter in line so I can tell how many amps the bulb is drawing. And then this won't be real scientific, but I have a light meter or lux meter and see how powerful the light is. And I'm not shutting out lights or anything, so there's going to be ambient light. Don't worry about it. I'm in a metal building, so if you hear cracking and groaning and creaking, it's just the building, it's not me. Alright, the first one is the standard stock bulb, which is 35 watt, 35 watt. And I'm going to show you the chart over here. But it drew 2.53 amps. It ran 229 degrees and it was still climbing, but slowly, and I didn't feel like waiting around. And at 6 feet, it did 990 lux, which is only relative to these other numbers, but it was a light. And then at 2 feet, which is 2 feet from the bulb, it did 3500 lux, which is actually really good. So it seemed like it was really bright close and it fell off quickly, which is what I've seen actually riding the bike. This bulb, I can't go more than like 30 miles an hour at night. I can't see anything. Next up is the LED, which isn't very bright, like not very bright at all. But it has the plus of only drawing 0.14 amps. It draws like nothing. So if you have a weak electrical system, this sucker's gonna run. You can basically just stare really hard at it and get it to light up. The temperature was much cooler. It ran 134 and didn't seem to be climbing too much after the same amount of time as the incandescent. So this is a very cool running bulb. It won't melt your plastic housing. The bad part is, at 6 feet, it only did 50 lux, and I could not get this thing to show anymore. And it might just be the color of the light or whatever, because it seemed like it didn't hardly do anything. And maybe this lux meter just doesn't like the light from the LED. And then at 2 feet away, the LED did 1500 lux, which was a lot better. So in other words, from like here, 1500 to like here, it fell off to like 50. So I'm not sure if I'm testing it right. I tried it 2 or 3 times and kept getting the same results. See how the LEDs are outwards, whereas that center one isn't really even putting out anything. So it's reflecting out onto the reflectors, but that's not getting projected forward. Next up is the 50-50 halogen. And this sucker's bright as hell. It's the brightest one of the bunch, and it drew the most amps. It drew 4.9 amps to light this sucker up. It also had some poor manufacturing. I never could really get it to ground, so I ran a separate ground. See that metal tab on the side is the ground, but this thing has like an overgrowth of plastic on it, so it's not making the ground connection. This thing was at 337 degrees really fast. I mean, it took minutes to get to 337 and it was just rising. So I cut the test off short because I don't want to melt my light. Okay, at 6 foot, it put out 1400 lux, which is quite a bit. At 6 foot, this was doing what the LED was doing at 2 feet. So the light seemed to be carrying, and it actually looked pretty bright too. And at 2 feet, this sucker put out 7500 lux. So that's like the brightest one by more than twice on all these things. Now the one that disappointed me for several reasons was this HID. And I let this run a long time, so it had plenty of time to warm up. But the HID drew 3.5 amps, which I thought, well, that's cool. And it got up to 230 degrees, but I never could get this to fit. It won't fit in my Husqvarna socket, and I'd have to make something to get it to fit in there. So it laid out, you had a big hole where the heat could get out. I couldn't get a 6-foot reading because I had to hold the light in the back of the thing, it kept falling out. But at 2 feet, it gave me 2200 lux, which is like less than the incandescent. And I'm thinking, well, I thought HIDs were supposed to be, you know, bright. And it drew 3.5 amps to put out less power than less lux than a incandescent. You know, when it sits in there, maybe it's not perfectly aligned. It's very critical bulb alignment for how much light comes out of your reflector. I think I'm going to put the LED one in because it's so much cooler and so much less amperage draw. Now I've already put an additional like off-road headlight on the Husqvarna because this headlight's useless. And what I want to do is actually try this one at night. Seems to work okay, got low and high beam. And then it's not super bright, but I got this other one up here that really lights it up. You can see the difference. As long as the bulb doesn't go out, that'll keep the tops off of me. At least I got a headlight. And then at night I'll run this big mama. And I can definitely see better with that. Now the only other odd thing, the high beam stays on no matter if you're in high or low. So LED must be bleeding through and lighting this up.